So Tracy was talking about how hard it is to get anybody into contract right now. I think that's probably the number one struggle, actually, at the moment. I've got several buyers that are in the same boat, and then when you finally get in and it sale fails, that is horrible because then you know you're right back out in the mix again, trying to go find them another house, and it's wearing on them also to have to. So if you can try to pre-prepare them for it's the odds are not great of getting the first house we come up to. Sometimes you get really lucky. I have gotten lucky and gotten two into contract super easy, but not usually. And that's going all the way up to the $1 million price range. Ryan Purdy has one right now that he listed at $1,050,000 and it sold well over asking price. And I think he got 9 offers on it. It was super competitive and they were cash offers on top of that. So that's one of the biggest struggles is cash. People actually have a lot of cash sitting around. It's amazing. And they're beating out the people like other people that have loans or I mean, the absolute worst loan you could have to come into, which is a great loan also, is the USDA loan. I think he's laughing.
Yeah.
Josh is laughing. You have the least amount of leverage on a USDA. If there are several other offers, they're going to look at you last, probably.
Chantel, that kind of begs the question in my mind for the clients that I'm working with that have cash. Is there any need to prove? I mean, like obviously when you get financing, you need to prove that you're pre-approved for that financing. But is there anything that should be done to prove that you have the cash on hand when making the offer?
Yes, that's super easy. Just a copy of their bank statement or wherever they're pulling the money from, and then black out the numbers so that you don't have any number on there, but you do have a proof that could be a bank statement, could be if they're pulling from IRA or 401k or something like that, wherever they're pulling it from. And then that actually on the contract, if you are not pulling it from a liquid form, you do have to check that box at the top of the financing contingency and say where it's coming from. And liquid would be cash, non-liquid would be sale of a home or stocks or something like that. So make sure that you are checking or not checking that box.
Thank you.
Since you're
sorry, can I ask a question on that? As far as liquid cash, would pulling from a trust account that needs to be signed off on still be considered liquid? I mean, it isn't just a bank account, but it does have to have a trustee sign off on it.
I believe that's liquid. Is it? Do you think so too, Josh? Do you guys look at it as liquid in the lending world?
So from the lending world, yeah, if it is their trust account, if it's the borrower's trust account and they are the trustee of that trust account, then totally fine. Those are their funds. In terms of gift funds, if you ever had a client who is getting gift funds from a parent or a family member, then the funds have to come from a non-trust account. They can't come from a trust account at that point. So there are some little differences there. In terms of your question though, original question on liquid funds, trust account, they're liquid. However, if it's coming from a trust that the trustee is somebody other than themselves, then yeah, you might need like a letter or something. Signed letter would probably be my recommendation from the trustee if they're not the ones that manage their trust. So if somebody's living and they have a trust, then it's generally a revocable living trust. If there's a trust that's not in their name that they're getting the funds from, then yeah, you'd probably want a letter from that.
How would we document that on a contract? I mean, do we need to document that when we write the contract in that situation?
I would, just to be safe, and do it in that section above the financing contingency that talks about, so right above where you check the box for conventional or cash or however you're paying, there's a section above that. I would put that in. Just the reason for it is there's delays in those cases. So liquid would be, you could pull it out of your account right now and wire it over. But in this case, there are signatures that in a process that has to be done that could delay it, and you want to notify them of delays. I think that's probably what the lending is looking for too, right? That's why they want that explanation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it could cause delays. But for a normal trust account that's in their own name, then that's usually not a big deal. It's just when it's in somebody else's name.
So I have a client, pardon my mask, I'm at a warehouse working today. So if somebody comes in, I might have to go silent for a bit too. I have a client with a trust. There is another trustee and he's well aware, and he said he moved the money to a cash position. So what does that mean? We are trying to get a letter from him. He's just, or some kind of proof of what that means. He's just hard to get a hold of apparently, but what does that mean to you if it's in a cash position?
Are they buying the property with cash?
It'll be part of it, and then the rest conventional loan
Got
until
it.
they sell their existing properties, one of which is fully owned outright. And then they'll pay off the loan they get as soon as they
Got it.
sell the other two
Okay.
houses.
So
But
the
it's like a third downing. It's like 200,000 down in cash.
got it. But essentially the
trust.
funds are coming from this trustee, and it's basically gift funds, right?
Well, I think it's between her and her mother, and so it's like her account, but there's a trustee, and so he approved it and said he moved it to a cash position.
Got it. If it's a trust, that's for the benefit of her, but it's managed by another trustee, then basically all the lender's going to need to do is document. They're going to have to get a copy of the trust. They're going to have to document the movement of the money. So
Okay.
get a statement when they moved it to the cash position, which means he probably just put it in a regular savings account, or checking account. Then they'll just have to document, via transaction history and stuff like that, going to the new account. So that shouldn't cause any, particular problem other than, documenting each step along the way. Whenever people move money, you've got to document it each time. And believe it or not, getting properly documented transaction histories these days can sometimes be a challenge because everybody's so mobile, but the mobile transaction histories don't have what lenders need on them to properly document stuff. They have to, people are better off either going to the bank or pulling it up on a desktop, which is tough sometimes because people are so mobile friendly these days. So, but it should be fine, Tracy, overall. They'll figure it out.
Okay. Thanks.
And it's still cash, so it still looks good.
Mm-hmm.
For that original question that you had about multiple offers, we probably moved back over to that because I think almost all of us are in that boat, or we're going to be. I know Stacy is actively in it right now and would like more information on that too, because we've been talking about that for the last 2 days. It's a rough spot. The best offer is always a cash offer, and a cash offer over asking when you have a multiple offer situation. The last one that I went through, again, had 5 offers, started at 435. We got it for 502, and we weren't a cash offer. We were a lot of cash. It was 300 down, a little more than that. I think she was going to end up putting like 350 down on it. So she looked really good. She did have a house to sell, but the house was about to close. So that factored in. When you have a home to sell, you're less desirable. So an offer that has a large down payment would be better than an offer with a lower down payment with no home to sell. But then you take offer with more down payment but a home to sell, now it starts to get scary for a seller to look at that house could sale fail. So do they want to take that offer because it's kind of iffy? And I just had 2 sale fail, actually. Morgan's sale fail. It's not my deal, it's hers. I was writing it with her just to help her out with it. But we sale failed because her buyer's home did not sell. Or no, sorry, I've got them mixed up. That was my deal up in Washington. So we lost that house because even though they picked us over other offers, when we had a contingency, we ended up sale failing. That would be the reason why you don't want to pick somebody who has a home for sale.
Then we should definitely, before Saturday morning, have a discussion, because we're probably going to have 2 or 3 offers to put in on different places.
That's good to know. You can only do one at a time. You can't
I meant the same.
Yeah.
So the same people can't put in an offer on more than one place.
Not unless they can qualify for all of them at the same time.
Okay. So texted them on some of the things that you're talking about right now, based on some of the stuff they said. So when she texts me back, then yeah, we'll have to have a chat.
Same thing applies to backup offers. That just reminded me, if you are in backup position on an offer and they find another house that they want to write on, they have to let go of the house they're on before they can write on the new one. There is a gap between when you actually find out that you're in backup, that your backup position went into first position. So you potentially, and I've had an agent do that, got into contract on 2. New agent didn't know she couldn't go out and write on another offer. This was a couple of years ago. She was able to get out of it, but if the first one had found out what she'd done, that would have been a mess. You just can't do that because they can't qualify for 2 at the same time. Unless they can, then that's great. They could buy 2 or 3 at the same time, but most people can't. So
Chantal,
go ahead.
if you already if your offer was already accepted, do they have to let you know that there is a backup offer?
They don't have to. It's good if
Okay.
they do. And they usually tell you that they've put somebody in backup, and you can ask that question, is somebody in backup? And I would recommend asking that, because if you do get in this area where you're negotiating some repairs and you may not have the leverage you think you do if there's a backup offer, because they'll threaten you with the backup offer. They'll tell you, we have a backup.
You are afraid of asking too much because there might be, but you don't really know. So it is always know that there is already one or not. Thanks.
Chantel, is there a way to verify the accuracy of those statements, or to do your own diligence to see that that is the case?
We assume that they're telling the truth. They should be telling the truth. If they're not and they get caught in it, they can lose their license, or, I mean, there's usually a process, a fine first, maybe a vacation, depends on how many reprimands somebody has for doing something and the severity of it. So the only way would be if you challenge them, if you believed and had pretty concrete evidence, because you don't want to look bad if you just call them out and say, I don't think you did this. And then you go through the process and find out that they actually did. Have some basis for why you're calling somebody out on that.
Is there a way to, I guess the question then is there a way to research to verify that claim?
Sometimes you can have broker to broker talk. We had an issue last year that Mike had resolved with an agent in our office, who another agent challenged this one on whether his offer had ever been submitted, because it was just the beginning part of the time where multiple offers were coming in, and the other agent felt like his offer had never been looked at. And our agent had proof that he had lots of conversations with that other agent and paperwork trails back and forth. So it just kind of went away, but it does make the agent who calls the other one out look a little bit bad if there's no basis for it. So be careful with it.
Yeah, in this market, I would expect there to be multiple backup offers, but wanting to just, I guess, best serve my clients to make sure that we don't get in a scenario where they're wanting to overbid because they feel like there's so many competitive bids. They're trying to figure out what's best for them in that process.
In an escalation clause, it does have some verbiage in there about showing what the other offer is. It doesn't show the people, but it only shows the offer you're beating too. If it's a backup offer, there may be some issue with them being able to show it to you because it shows an amount. And if your offer goes away, there steps in, and now people know what offers were. So that could be kind of touchy. They might show it to you, might not show it to you. But there is verbiage on an escalation clause to show what the other offer is, to protect you from paying too much in that case. If you're doing highest and best and you're putting out 500,000 and the other guy was 495, you're not going to see the other offer because it's highest and best. There's no reason for why you would be questioning why you're paying 500 and they would have only paid 495 because you offered for 500. That also said, they could pick the 495 over you. It's not always about price. It's about what works for the seller the best. So sometimes the seller just decides, I want to take the lower offer over the higher offer just because, or usually it's a reason. It's they'll close faster, they'll let me rent back longer, whatever the little features are in that contract that were less. Usually it is over less risk. It's all about risk right now. Risk and money, those are really the 2 big factors in getting your offer approved. Have a non-risky person with cash. That would be perfect. Big feature we're using right now too is not asking for repairs. So this is the most common way I've seen things written up lately. Either no repairs, but leave your contingency in place. Don't not do an inspection. One of the ones I failed on, which is the one I wanted to bring up today, was a beautiful home. It had no dirt anywhere. It was one of the most perfect houses I've ever seen, ever. Never expected in a million years anything was going to come up on the inspection. So we wrote it so she wasn't going to ask for repairs, but we did want to be able to do inspections just to make sure there wasn't anything big that she would back out on. And it turned out that there was some severe mold in the attic area. And at first we thought it was the roof that had just been replaced and that they did it wrong and there's water up there and we couldn't figure out why it was still wet 3 weeks later. The listing agent is kind of that classic listing agent I warn everybody about, where she's making decisions for her seller. And I believe she's probably not telling her seller everything that we're telling her. So we ended up, rather than having another roofer come out, we had a home inspector come out, we had their roofer come out who said there was a leak in the house prior to him putting the new roof on. So he was willing to replace the 4 boards that were around the skylight that was actually leaking. But there's water all the way along that entire side of the house in the attic area. So we hired a mold person to come in. And they said, this is severe mold. This has been going on before the roof. It has nothing to do with the roof. There's not enough ventilation up there. And when I brought that up to the other agent, she's stuck on the roof. She said, I wish you would have brought out another roofer. She's so stuck on the roof being the problem. The roof was not the problem. The ventilation in the house was the problem. And then the leak exacerbated it. So it's got a severe mold problem up there. So we failed on it. We just backed out. I wouldn't buy a house like that. I wouldn't want my buyer to buy a house like that. It does have to be their decision. So I left it in her hands. I didn't try to sway her one way or the other. Take the house, don't take the house. I just gave her the information. And then when she said, I want out, I said, that's what I would have done too. I just don't want to sway you one way or the other. And I did tell the other agent, it's got mold and you now need to disclose that, but I'm willing to bet she's not going to. And it's not my problem, as much as it bothers me that that's probably going to happen to the next buyer if they don't get a proper inspection or if they believe what the seller tells them, because I don't even think that the seller's getting enough information from the listing agent. And
That's sad. That happened in commercial all the time.
It's why you hire agents and why I want you guys all to be good agents, because I don't want you to be like that. I don't want you telling your seller what to do, withholding information, doing anything that is not, you don't represent the buyer. She doesn't represent the buyer. She only represents her seller, but both of them could be in some pretty serious trouble down the road if they don't disclose this and somehow it comes out. My buyer could reach out to them and say, hey, did you know that there's mold in the attic after the whole sale's done? And if they say, no, I didn't know, now the realtor's in trouble too for not disclosing that.
Chantel, does that create any obligation on our behalf if we get in a situation, if we find ourselves in a situation like that and we are aware of that information and we're also aware that information is not disclosed? Let's say the home goes back on the market and it's not disclosed in the listing. I guess you don't have to disclose it in the listing, but if nothing else to reduce our own liability, is there further action we need to take at that point?
If you're on the buyer side, no. If you're on the listing side, yes. The property disclosures need to be redone. And if the seller decides that they want to go remedy the problem now, you need to be letting people know that future buyers that come in, let them know we had this issue, we went in and rectified it, here's all our paperwork. Do your own due diligence to see if it's done adequately enough for you. But as a buyer's agent, you don't represent that side. So there's nothing that we can really do other than be frustrated that happened. But I did protect my buyer. We're moving on to another property. She's not going to get herself into something that could be a huge mess.
And as a listing agent, if they refuse to put that in the disclosure, is that the time you might want to consider cutting ties for your own sake?
That's when you could either have your broker go to their broker, or you can report them to the real estate agency. And then the agency will look into it and do a reprimand if they find out that they did not disclose it. So yes, if you have proof of somebody doing something that they shouldn't do, you can turn them into the real estate agency.
But I would think I might be tempted to just say, maybe I shouldn't be the one representing you if you choose not to disclose something that I'm aware of.
If your seller is not going to put that out there, then you need to fire them. Don't go down with them. That's the worst thing that you can do. Definitely fire them right away. If they're not willing to put it in, you explain to them that it's not ethical, it's not legal. If you don't represent this, if you don't disclose it, and we move forward and something happens afterwards, whether something happens or not, it's not ethical or legal. So you don't want to put yourself in that position. So that didn't really answer the rest of the questions on multi-offers. Just mention the fact that if you do say no repairs, leave your contingency in there so you can get out of it. And it doesn't mean that I had this question asked of me yesterday. So if we say we're not going to do repairs and then we get in there and we find out the foundation is bad and it's $100,000, can we ask for repairs at that point? And you can. And I just told them, just call the agent and say it wasn't a foundation issue on this one, but it did have a couple of major issues that they didn't see coming, just like us. We did the same thing, went back to the seller and said, we have major mold issue. Is she willing to fix it? Because if not, we're going to leave. And so you're still negotiating repairs, even though you said you wouldn't, but you can leave at that point if they're not willing to do something like that. And they might put it back on the market, disclose that it has major mold issues. They're not willing to take care of it, but they discounted the price to take care of it. And life is all good that way.
And then with the repairs, sorry, Chantel. Can you also ask them, could you get an estimate of the repair and just ask for that be acknowledged in a price reduction in the offer as an alternative?
Yes. So that's something you could do in a competitive offer situation too. Ask the listing agent ahead of time, do your people, would they rather do repairs? Would they rather do a credit? Josh has to keep his ears closed for a minute on this one because we as agents typically don't send over repair addendums to lenders. We usually just have it on an addendum. Hopefully you're really not listening to this. That just says that it's a price reduction or a credit, but we don't say what it's for. It stands by itself. You didn't hear any of that, Josh. I know you know we do it, but we're really not supposed to do that. You're treading kind of a fine line with that. But it's common to do that because a lot of people, if it's not a major thing, if you're doing an FHA loan or a VA loan or a USDA loan, those credits don't always work. If it's a roof or siding or some big major thing that you're doing, flooring, something like that, those things have to be done prior to closing or the loan won't close. So keep that in mind too. When you're asking that question, would your seller rather give credits? Would they rather do repairs if in the event? So then you can write your offer according to that. And then again, that all depends on what the state of the home looks like, how competitive it is, what your buyers are willing to do, not do. Some people are super handy and they'll take things on. Other people don't even know what a hammer looks like. So they can't do anything on their own.
And in this crazy market, how much time do you have to estimate repairs to try to negotiate a discount?
Oh, that's a good question, because one thing that people are starting to do is shorten that period of time from 10 days down to 5. And you can do that if you are, there's my son in the background. If you have septic and well, that's going to be really difficult to get through in 5 days. Mold inspections also really difficult to get through that fast. They do, when you come out and do a mold, they'll tell you right away, yes, this is mold, but it's not going to tell you the type or how they're going to get rid of it and deal with it. That takes about 3 days to get that back. So be careful with the shortening the time, but I do see that help win offers when you shorten that inspection timeline.
You can always extend that, right? So you
can, but it's never a guarantee.
Yeah.
So if you put 5 on there and then you get into it and you need longer, they may not give it to you. There's no guarantee that they will extend, because if they're saying 5 days, they want to get through this fast. They don't want to.
But there is always like the thing that you have to come up with pricing. So it makes me a little nervous to reduce that much the time for inspections, because you cannot get the rate on people coming in or checking or whatever you have. It takes longer. It is not the same. I mean, at the next day, they cannot make it. So that puts you in a hard position.
It does. Yeah. Had a couple of those come up even on the 10-day. That happens. Actually, one of the agents that's here on this board is in that position with another. They're going to have to extend to try to get through their timeline. What are some other things? Josh, what do you see that wins offers? Do you know anything offhand that?
Sure. Well, so escalation clauses definitely seem to be helpful
Yes.
these days. And I think I've written 10 pre-approval letters at different levels for one offer, just so that in the escalation clause, they had, they had what they needed for backing up that offer to make sure that, the listing agent and the seller knew, that this person was qualified sort of at each level. So definitely those, seem to be helpful, and, your buyer doesn't overpay with those, because it's, they've got sort of a stopping point. So that's helpful. Obviously, your person's got to be pre-approved. Make sure they're using a local lender. It's less competitive when you've got, a pre-approval letter that's generic, from 3 months ago from Quicken, versus somebody who, wrote one that morning, and the listing agent can get in touch with them. It's just so competitive right now. You've really got to have somebody that you can get in touch with. So definitely from a lending side, make sure that your folks are using local lenders, for sure. And then what else help winning offers? So we've seen people waive the appraisal contingency, provided they've got enough enough funds to make up the difference. Now, what I've seen is they'll put a cap on it, though, because if you're offering for over and you're concerned about that home appraising for what you've had to go up to win it, then you've got to consult your buyer and the lender to make sure that by what's the threshold, are they willing to make up that difference. So I've had a few recently that have purchased by waiving, have won their offer by waiving the threshold. And I can't remember what the gaps were, but I talked it through with both the buyer and their agent, and let them know sort of, where would it start impacting, their loan, and where wouldn't it. These folks had a good amount of money down. That's going to be more difficult if you've got somebody with like a 3% down type of situation, but that's definitely been an option. And then appraisal waivers, when you can get them. I know unfortunately, you don't really know until you're under contract if you have an appraisal waiver or not. But those are, huge for speeding up the process when you can get one.
And Josh and Chantel and anybody on the call, are currently in the market are offers that are contingent on financing. Are they even competing right now with cash offers? Or of the majority of closings that are happening, how many of those are finance versus all cash? Do we have a sense of that?
I mean, we continue to do those. Partially, I think, people know that the departing home's going to sell probably pretty quick. Or it's likely under contract already. A lot of times what I find is those ones that are getting accepted is the seller, is the buyer, their departing home's already under contract and has a close date. So that's definitely makes them more competitive. Plus they have a bigger down payment, so there's less risk. Chantel brought up, risk earlier as, sort of one of the big things. If you've got somebody who's selling, that may take you longer to close, but that also means they're probably bringing a bigger down payment. You may have a first-time home buyer that's non-contingent, which is great. That makes them more competitive in that respect. But if they're only bringing 3% down, maybe their debt to income ratios are sort of pushing the top, there's more risk on that side. So some questions, and things to definitely look at when you're reviewing pre-approval letters is, there's sort of risk, there can be risk on both sides, and maybe sometimes there's less risk with a contingent offer because, they're dragging equity over from, their previous home. What do you think, Chantel?
That sounds good. Perfect. Does that all make sense to everybody? I know Stacy had a lot of questions around this because she wants to write an offer, and this is a factor in it. And I know, was it Kelly that sent you the messages that you sent me this morning with all the?
No, Fred, from our office.
Okay.
He met with him yesterday just to pick his brain because, he's young and kind of kicked it in the ass. He's got the two uncles that he was on their team initially.
Sold in Oregon.
His office is right behind mine. So, and my daughter's best friend, that's her older brother.
Okay.
It was just like I'm sorry. There's baby ears there.
Go for it.
Let's shoot the crud.
She's too young to know. Go for it.
So I was just let's shoot the crap session. And so he goes, let me know how your open house goes. Well, houses don't come up in Sherwood very often. And sure enough, a house came up in Sherwood, and then not even 15 to 30 minutes before we went to go see that one, another one came up. And they were all like exactly on the wish list or so close to it that they sent me. They are, see, my phone is going off like crazy now. Pre-approved. No, I'm on here, sorry. Pre-approved, they are pre-approved. They are under contract selling their house now. And I think that's what I'm being told. Just a second.
Is their house here in Oregon?
Yeah, they're in Southeast Portland.
Okay. So they will be contingent. That's not as great, even though it's under contract.
Right. So as we've been in this little session here, I've been asking them questions and waiting for answers back. So, as I get answers back, so they are pre-approved for 650,000, but none of the houses that we're looking at are above 600.
So that's good. They have some room then, hopefully.
What's
Hopefully they have some room. We should probably talk after this.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
And see, then I can get more details about what they actually look like without everybody hearing all their
Yeah,
details.
but yeah, there's two of them here in Sherwood. We're looking at another one. That's the other thing is one of them is listed with a broker in our office. That's one of the Sherwood ones. Another Sherwood one here that was listed again on the same day yesterday is with somebody outside of our office. But both of those brokers are going to run like 3 to 5 days of open houses.
Mm-hmm.
And will not be reviewing any offers until the end of that 5-day stretch.
Okay. That's common. That's very, very
so
common.
That's the advice that I sent you from Fred in our office, was that don't put in your offer until the end, because they'll use that as leverage
That's
to
very
try and get a better price out of you.
That's one of my biggest tactics, is waiting till the end, because if you do play your hand ahead of time, you never know how much information a listing agent's going to give out. And if they already have your offer, then they could leverage that against another one.
Right.
So, and you can call last minute and leverage the other offers that went in ahead.
But then there is they really want Sherwood, but there's a more desirable property that fits every aspect pretty much of their wish list, that's in Tualatin. So close, but not the same school district. And that would be their backup.
Oh, good. Okay.
Sometimes I found out that they don't accept escalation clauses.
This is true
So
too.
you make sure they do take escalation clauses because they will make you remake another one,
Yeah.
just to save you some time.
That is very true.
And
Yeah.
is there any difference if your buyer has a makes an offer contingent on the sale of their home and their sale is out of state? If that
No.
home is not within Oregon?
Yeah, it won't matter. They just want a copy of your sale with black out the names again, but they do want a copy of the sale to make sure it's actually happening, what the closing date is, things like that.
I'll be right back.
Okay. So that was a good question too. Looks like Josh got up too. Anybody have any other questions that they want to go over that we haven't brought up so far?
I would like us to go over how you'd write up like the appraisal gap coverage, you know, what that looks like. And then also when Josh comes back, he said he wrote like 10 different letters of approval. Are you only initially providing the first one and then you wait to hear back and they say, oh, it's higher, and then you've already got the next one to give them? You know, at what point do you put all the letters on the table? Because then you're showing, but I mean, either way, you're showing your hand. If you're saying escalation clause up to X, you're sort of showing your hand. So I'd love to see more about that and how the process works.
We usually write it for the amount of whatever we're offering, and start at the bottom because, yeah, you don't want to show your hand. The biggest reason for me, and actually this was on my deal with Lester, this happened where, and it wasn't his buyer, but the other one. We had two on that one. And the other buyer, because they couldn't get a hold of their lender, gave us their pre-approval for their max amount. And when my seller saw it, it offended her that they weren't willing to spend the max amount, which was her asking price, but her asking price was too high. So, but it does create that if you give the highest amount up, in the seller's mind, they start thinking, you can pay more. Why don't you pay more? It's not always worth it to them to pay more. So a good lender like Josh gives you lots of letters along the way. It's pretty easy for them to go in there and just switch them out. I'm sorry. Get rid of that.
What does that process look like?
You definitely want to have a competitive edge. So, you know, but you don't want to tip your hand. In the one where I wrote like 10, I think they just delivered them as needed. They were just all emailed. So that's really, you know, sort of depends on the strategy you're going after.
How do you write that up in an offer, write up a escalation? So say it's a $600,000 house and you're offering 600, but you're willing to go to 700 as an example. How do you write that
There's an addendum for it. A lot of agents are coming up with their own verbiage and putting it on a blank addendum and sending it over. But we do have a KW addendum that covers all of it, that how it works, what the increment is. So when I talk to my buyers, I just say, what's your max amount that you're drop dead point on this house where you're not going to spend more than that, but you're comfortable spending that much. So we'll say on a 450 house, maybe their max is 500. So you'll start at 450 in the main body of the offer, and then you will note in the offer that there's an escalation clause. Sometimes you don't note in there. Sometimes you can throw an escalation clause at an offer after you've already written it before they reviewed it. So maybe they want to go 450, don't want to do an escalation, and then they find out there's lots of offers, let's add an escalation. But the escalation will be whatever their max is. That'll say they'll pay 1,500 or 5,000 over the highest and best other offer up to 500,000 is how they're worded. And then they do have to show you there's verbiage in there about what the other highest offer is. Do you have any thoughts on that, Josh?
What's that?
About writing that up?
Yeah, anything that with lending that complicates?
No, not really. I mean, once it's accepted, then that's just the new, purchase price. I've seen with the escalation clauses sort of the commingling of the waiving the appraisal contingency up to a certain point as well to sort of strengthen their position. That's helped on a few occasions, I think.
So for buyers that have cash, but they're thinking about the clients that I'm working with currently are kind of wanting to find an interim house until I think they have enough cash to pay something, and then they intend for it to be a rental in a year or two. Obviously, the appraisal is not an issue for purchase because they're working with cash, but when thinking about future rental property or turning it into a future rental property, is there anything that you should be, or I should be helping them think through about what it appraises at currently? Is there any tie between appraised value and rental, or is it just what the rental market will bear? That may be outside the scope of this class.
Yeah, it won't matter. I think it's just whatever it will rent for long term, how long they're going to keep it, what the area is. I don't do
That's true.
property management, so they would probably want to consult somebody in that world, because we're not in that world necessarily. Unless you want to specialize in that area, you can, and then help people. But no, the appraisal
Don't
really
do it.
does not matter. Super especially right now. Oh my gosh, not with all these.
Yeah, just when I think, is there anything I should just make them aware of to think through about that? But
Yeah, with
I'll just
appraisal,
refer to the property manager.
yeah, that's what I would do. And
Yeah.
they'll get a field. I know they asked me that question when I was there that day about the rental market. And, it's different everywhere you are. It depends on what you're willing to pay for it, what you're looking for.
Yeah, normally if they have enough cash flow and, and they gave a very good down payment, it is, it gives you a very good cap rate. So that will be one of the things to consider.
And I
So
guess-
if the loan, help me with this, Josh. If the loan is, if he's going to be having kind of like a negative cash flow, then don't even take it. Don't even take it. But the area, it depends in what right now with the COVID is a little different. We currently have some rentals, and they've been paying, thanks to God. Knocking wood, but there are some other people that haven't been that lucky. So it's hopefully everything gets straight up after all this COVID and what's the name of this moratorium, eviction, et cetera. Yeah.
There are some rules around lending. Some loans do not allow you to rent it out in your first or second year, especially VA loans, FHA loans have clauses about that. So, but in your case, it won't apply. But if you did have someone else that wanted to rent it, you do have to get a specific kind of loan. Josh could talk about that maybe, and also if they're in that position where they're gonna, the house that they're living in now, they maybe want to rent that out to buy a second house. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that.
Sure. So going back to something originally though that Carrie was saying about her buyers buying with cash and then maybe renting it later, and then buying another home. So if you've got somebody in the fortunate position that can buy their house in cash, but maybe they don't necessarily want to, but it's a more competitive position for them to be in to buy the house, then if they have the ability to buy it cash, then they can do that and then do delayed financing after they close. So there is some pricing differences when it comes to doing a refinance versus a purchase. And so that's why if you buy with cash and you decide to finance it after you've closed, then you can do delayed financing, and it's more looked at like a purchase from a pricing standpoint than a refinance within like the first 6 months. So if you've got somebody who can do it, they don't necessarily want to, but they want to be more competitive, you just let them know that they have the ability to finance it after they've moved in. I did this recently with somebody. He was going to sell his house in Aurora, but he didn't want to go contingent. So he went ahead and bought this house in Tualatin for cash. And then we did the delayed financing for him. We started it like a week after he'd, already closed. So
That can help you get that edge.
yeah, it did. It worked out really well for him. So when it comes to renting out your home that you purchased as a primary residence, general rule is about a year, unless you've got a life change, that requires you to move. So in terms of any tax implications, though, you'd want to, that person would want to consult a tax professional, CPA, to make sure that they're, not going to run anything there. Or if they are, what are those tax implications? But in terms of, lending guidelines, so a good one is, you brought up the VA loan. So I had a borrower who bought a condo as a primary residence, VA loan. Well, his VA status, or he was on active duty, and his duty station changed it was, I think, like 4 months after he closed. And so as a result, he's now allowed to rent that out because he can't live there. His duty station's in California, home's in Oregon. So the VA makes, has a provision that allows people to do that. But typically, so for conventional lending and for FHA, a year is sort of the guideline, unless you have a life change, a reasonable life change that makes that difference. There's no early payoff penalty or anything, but if you're going to convert it to a rental property, the sort of the baseline is 1 year for that. So a lot of folks who are buying their first home when they're young, before they have kids, stuff like that, whatever the case may be, they'll buy a home, they'll live in it for a year, and then they'll rent it out and they'll go buy their next home. And they'll do that for a little while until they've got a few rental places. Somebody from our office did that. Chantel, I don't know if you remember Sam, who used to be on our team, but he did that. Him and his wife bought a fourplex on a FHA loan, 3.5% down. He did 5% down on a conventional loan because he didn't want to have to refinance out of the FHA. But they lived in one of the units for a year and rented out the other 3. And then after a year, they bought another one. It was a triplex this time, and then rented out that one. And after a year, he was able to do that. So lots of great options there. On rental income, the sort of general guideline is people are allowed to use up to 75% of the gross rent. So if you rent out the property for $1,000 a month, then we as lenders were allowed to use $750 of that towards offsetting the mortgage payment. That is for new rentals. If you've got a rental that has existing, and this comes up more with refinances and purchases, but if you've got a rental that has existing rental income, then we base that off of that person's tax returns, because that's now regular sort of rental income, and now there's history of that. You can see sort of what they're writing off, stuff like that. But generally, it's about 75% rule.
Any questions anybody has? Especially for Josh. Okay, go ahead.
So this isn't a problem yet, but I am anticipating a conversation coming up with my buyers that are working with cash around the appraisal value. If we get into a situation where we make an offer, it's kind of maxed at what they want to spend, their cap of what they want to spend. And then the appraisal comes in much lower because the market is demanding over asking or over prices. What is the conversation there to have, or like, what are the things that I should be kind of having them think about in their decision about whether they want to proceed based on the appraised value?
With cash, you don't need an appraisal.
No,
be optional.
Well, they won't have one at all.
No, they don't have to do one unless they want to do one. And in this market, it's probably going to be less than whatever they're paying. So they could do it just so they could know, but it also isn't going to be accurate 2 months from now when the prices now catch up with what they actually paid. But they don't have to do it on cash. It's not required. It's only required for a loan.
Okay. So really, it's just what the market will bear. That's what it's worth right now.
Yeah, it's worth whatever it is to them to buy it. And knowing that what they're paying for it right now is again not going to appraise, because appraisals cannot keep up right now. The prices are going up way too high, and that won't reflect for a month or two on where we're at right now. We're not going to see that in an appraisal for another couple months.
Are they also generally coming in 15% lower than asking price if you're working with someone who does need lending, who needs funding?
It varies. This is a good question. You probably see more of that than I do. 15% is what I'm seeing in the $400,000 range, 300, 400. It varies area and amount of loan that you're doing also. So type of home, it can be, I sold one for 428 in Vancouver. They were asking 428 for it. I guess we got it for 427 and it appraised for 428, but we didn't have this huge bidding war and crazy stuff. It was in December also, so you'd think we would have, but we didn't. We got lucky on that one. And then I told you about the other one that was for 15%, but I'll let him answer that because he sees a lot of this.
Yeah, we really haven't. We've been lucky, knock on wood. We haven't really seen too many issues with the appraisals on purchases. Some on refinances because they're a little more subjective. You don't have somebody knocking on the door saying, "Hey, I'm willing to pay this amount of money for this house." So, yeah, we really haven't had issues with appraisals coming in low recently, with the exception of the occasional. What you need to look out for is like condo and townhouse ones. And the reason why is because, as Chantel mentioned, it takes a little while for things to catch up. Well, if you had a condo that's almost identical to the one you're buying, selling the same project, 2-3 months ago, or or even more recent than that, for $20,000 less than what you're trying to get it to appraise for, then it's harder for the appraiser at that point to justify using other comps to bring up that amount. What they're going to look at is they're going to pull what the current appreciation has been for that market in to where that condo or townhouse is. They'll look at other projects as well, but it's tough when you've got a unit that is really comparable to one that sold in the condo recently. So that's where we've seen some more issues than we have on standalone homes. We haven't had too many issues with that, just because there are a lot of comps out there right now that are selling strong, and the appreciation rate's going well. So now you'll probably run into that more in the maybe some of the higher ones too. So some of the higher value homes. We saw that one not too long ago with a home. I think it was 2.2 that was selling. So came in a little low. So, but other than that, no, we haven't had too many issues.
Probably see it more on my end than with the agents I'm working with and in the office.
Yeah. We haven't seen it a ton, but if you guys have, then for sure.
Any other questions? We're right at 5 o'clock. I was hoping that we would be able to go over some loan options, but are you willing to come back again next Thursday?
Yeah, I'll come back every week. It's fun. Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. So okay. Yeah. Josh is
he's one of the more dependable, probably one of the most dependable loan officers I've worked with. So it's always seamless, amazing. Amazing. He gets back to you really fast. Doesn't matter if it's weekends or not. And if he is doing something that he can't talk to you right away, he'll let you know and he gets right back to you. So, and that's really important. That's one of the biggest things I talk to all of you as new agents about, that the two people that fail us the most in the transaction are the lender and the other agent, which is why I have you on a referral list that I hand them when they first come on board, because I've worked with him and I know he just does what he says he's going to do, and it gets done. And you can depend on him, or you can't always with other and with other lenders.
Thank you. I paid her to say that.
Sorry. What are we in terms of a timeline right now for appraisals?
Oh, great question. I mean, if you're just talking in the Portland metro area, you know, probably if you order it right away, you're going to get about a 10 to 12 day 10 to 12 business day turnaround on it. So we have a panel of appraisers that we use. And so sometimes they get busy, but we also don't like to go off of that panel if we don't have to, just because we know their work, and might be one of the reasons why we don't have too many appraisal issues, because we use the same people over and over again. So
Can you say right away, Josh, at what point in the, like at the point that you're offering, or when that it's
or as soon as it's under contract, I mean, you want your lender to order the appraisal. I mean, that's, or next day at the very least. They've got to be able to get their initial disclosures out. But they don't have to have them signed yet. They can get that appraisal on order, really quickly. And that gets it into the queue. There was a point to where the agents were asking us not to order the appraisal until after they had worked through the inspection contingency. And that's something I try to remember to check in with each of y'all when we go into it. But because it's, competitive, appraisers are busy, we usually want to go ahead and get it ordered, so at least get it queued up. And if something happens during the inspection contingency, just let me know right away so I can cancel it. But you want to get it in the queue so that it gets scheduled.
Any other questions? So quiet. Okay, so we just made it to, well, it's 2:00 your time. So I guess we can end, and then next week we'll have him back, and I'm hoping that he can go into some different loan types. But if you have not already picked his brain, feel free to call him and just talk about those. They can really help you if you're at an open house or with a new client, knowing what objections, when somebody says, I don't have a down payment, you would know all the different loan types that he has, or the rental thing that he talked about. Just there's so many different options that he has available to him that can help you with your clients. So really good to know. And then you look like you know everything when your client's talking to you, asking you questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, reach out anytime. If you have somebody who has a question right there in the spot you don't know, you're welcome to call me. And if I can answer, just put me on speakerphone, and I'm happy to answer their questions on the spot. So.
Thank you so much. You have been so helpful all this time. Yeah. I've been calling him Josh. Josh, what do I do with this? What is this about?
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
I'm happy to help.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you also. Thanks, Philip.
All right.
So if you guys need anything, what's that?
I just was saying thank you and take care.
Okay, thank you. You guys take care too. If you need anything, reach out.
You guys.
Okay.
Bye, Chantal, wherever you are.
Bye. I'm not far.